Actually, you know what? I lied to you. I'm not set. I need water. I need water. I'll be back.
This is going to be the intro, folks. So we're a professional podcast, and I asked Broedy if he's ready to go, and he said yes, and he pressed the button. So that's you and I just hang out while we're waiting. How's your day? How's everyone treating you? Are you living your best life? Hey man, hey, welcome back. You all set? And action.
From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits.
All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Chris Sellers.
And from Portland, Oregon, I'm Broedy Adbox.
And we are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And welcome, misfits, to episode 13. Quick disclaimer, I lied at the end of episode 12. I thought this episode was going to be with my friend Mathilde. We're going to talk about work-life balance. I mentioned that she's traveling the world right now, so I don't know where she is, and that's precisely the predicament we end up in. So she's in France at the moment, which means I'm in Sydney, Brody's in Portland, she's somewhere in France, which means time zones will be a bit of a hassle. So we've decided to push her back to next week, where she'll be in Sri Lanka, where the time, where the time zones will be a bit more conducive to what we want to do here. But the good news for you is that means episode 13 now is the voted on episode by you guys. So in this little mini arc of talking about family and familial relationships, we asked all of you misfits on the Facebook group and on the LinkedIn group and all the social channels, here's 3 options. Broedy, correct me if I'm wrong. I think one was living up to family expectations. The second one was career and kids. And the third one was
Family expectation, career and kids, and can you choose your family?
Yes, you're right. So, can you choose your family, blood thicker than water and all of that?
Right, we hadn't. That was our opener for last week's episode.
For last week's episode. And within 48 hours, you guys were, again, kind of unanimous. It's like you want to hear us talk about career and kids, which is what I wanted to talk about. And I think it's going to be a cool conversation because Broedy has all the kids and I have none. So we're going to have 2 very different perspectives here. So let's get into it. Broedy, you have 4 children and you have a career. Is this something you plan? Straight out of the bus.
No. Yeah, so definitely not. My oldest was a one-night stand situation. Never with his mother, never in a relationship. Still nothing like that. And, that is what it is. And then I had 2 sons that I kind of gained when I got with my current partner. And then we had Jax. And so now we're at 4. And none of it was planned. I mean, realistically, none of it was planned. Maybe a little reckless not to try to prevent, but that's where we were at. If it happens, it happens, and it's life, and we welcome it. So that's definitely not planned. Definitely not planned. And
but are they the best thing that ever happened to you? Because that's what every parent says. You know what I mean? It's always a retroactive, divorced, hate your ex-wife, blah blah. Oh, but my kids, best thing that ever happened to me. They're the apple of my eye and the jewel in the sky and all of this sort of shit, which I, and sometimes a little bit cynical of, but where do you sit with that?
It's, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, obviously they are the crux of meaning for me, but like all of that aside, it's also been the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and it's interesting because just for a little freaking personal backdrop here, my biological father, I don't know him. I never met him, don't know him, chose not to be in my life. And for me, that just never was an option. It was just never an option. So and not in the way that it sounds, but this is something I have to do, right? It's just there's no way around it. And yeah, it is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, and I'm constantly learning. And again, they are definitely the center of my world, but sometimes that doesn't mean it's joyful.
How do you? I mean, I'm curious because I've got no kids that I'm aware of. And it's always a sort
One day.
one maybe, but it's also always a source of wonder to me how people even find the time, with one or two, and you've got four, and have managed to hold down jobs in the meantime. Now I know it's not just a one-man show. I know it takes a village, and you've got a partner, and in-laws and family and friends and all of that sort of stuff. But still, it's a 24-hour gig for at least 20 years per kid. Here's a reasonable question. I guess if Broedy, where you are now, if you had to look back to like 20-year-old Broedy, would you do it all again?
Yeah, that sucks because it's such a loaded question, right? And I think when you become a parent, you understand that dynamic of it where, you know, I've met my kids, so it's not fair. You know what I mean? Like I would,
Yeah.
I would. They're all funny and I love them. And the things we've been through have shaped who I am. So yeah, I would because I've met them, right? But if you had asked 20-year-old Broedy if he would willingly go through what he was about to go through, 19-year-old Broedy, excuse me, um, I think he would ask for a different route, and that's just me being honest. And
Yeah.
I don't know. The thing about it is, I think if I hadn't had kids as early as I did, and I hadn't adopted that dynamic into my life, I wouldn't have grown. I was a really reckless younger person, and I've always had an interesting perspective, but I didn't have anything that put life into scope for me. And then having kids really put life into scope for me. And so, as the person I am now, yeah, I would wish that for 19-year-old Broedy as well. I would. I know
Really interesting.
it sounds nuts, right? Like, but I would because I think there's pieces of that journey that saved me. I think there's pieces of that journey that have challenged me in the opposite direction than I would have walked. And I'd like to think that it's made me a better person than I would have ended up if I hadn't, right?
Mm.
But who knows? Who knows? That's kind of the thing too. Is I'm humble enough to admit that what I've accomplished in the last 5 years with all four, right? Like you talked about, trying to manage the time, trying to manage the attention. Um, yeah, it's a weird thought process to go through. Like, what would I accomplish if it was all my time? Probably quite a bit. Probably quite a bit. But again, I don't know if I would have pursued that same path if they weren't in my life. So it's a weird kind of multiverse. You try to explore those separate strands of life kind of theory of thought. But yeah, I would. I'd wish it on myself again. I'd go through it all again. Yeah, and I can't ask you. I was going to say, well, would you? It's like, but I mean, I guess I can. I guess I
Yeah.
can. Would you? It's interesting. If you could have done it different, would you have had kids? Would you have had them earlier? Would you have had,
Well, yeah, no, fair question. I think the only honest answer, I guess, is no, because this is where I am now. I think if I wanted kids, I'd have them. And even when I was in serious long-term relationships, it wasn't like marriage and kids wasn't the primary burning focus. You know, I had other projects, there was things I wanted to do, there's things I wanted to achieve. So arguably I'm still too selfish. And there's still a lot that I want to accomplish. And I'm aware of the demand of time and energy that kids will take. I won't say, excuse me, I won't say my reasoning has always been this objective and clear. Because, you know, in your 20s, you know, when you're dating someone for the first time and that girlfriend's going to be your wife and all this sort of shit, you don't really, you know, kids are a maybe. But also we're sort of
which
in a
is
town
bizarre, right? Because I know that exact time frame mindset that you sink yourself into, and then, like you said, but the thing that would hold you to that path in a linear sense, is the option still, right? You're like, maybe.
Yeah. But, and you know, arguably a large percentage of the misfits at home fall into this demographic of, you know, early 20s or even mid 30s. We surprisingly enough, our demographics like 50% female. So for our female misfits, you know, you've got a clock that's ticking, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? So you've got more immediate decisions to make around what kind of life that you want to have, what sort of career, what sort of partner. Those are real decisions that have some weight and a time to them. Me, again, I used to joke with my ex when every now and then someone would get married or we'd go to a wedding and she'd get a bit clucky and all that sort of shit. And I'd go, well, look, yeah. But I'm like, look, but do you really see me as your husband? And she's like, fuck no. I'm like, right. But committed to you as a partner long term, let's travel the world together and do amazing things, like absolutely. But you know, this white picket fence, 2.5 kids, dog and a station wagon isn't for everyone.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to ask you as you're like walking through this out loud with me. I'm curious, is that ever something for you?
It's a really good question, and some close friends of mine asked me recently at a dinner party, like, well, do you think you'd ever have kids? And arguably, I don't know. And besides, the decision isn't solely mine, is it? Like, I'm gonna have a girlfriend, a partner, a fiance, or whatever, and she's gonna have a say too. And this is what I mean. It's you can't. These sort of conversations and these.
I sound like such a douche that I didn't use that. What? Fair.
No. But this is. We seem to have these conversations in isolation.
Okay, objectively.
Yeah.
It's just you, and you're the one that gets to make the decision. You know what I mean? Is there a piece of you? Is there a piece of you that looks at it and it just feels like a dream, or is it all kind of
it's a solid maybe. It's a solid maybe. And again, I'll still say I don't know. You know, looking forward into the next, you know, 2 or 3 or 5 years, which I never ever fucking do. But life's probably going to change for me massively in the next 6 months, which means I could end up living anywhere in the world. Arguably, finances will be a bit more flexible for me. And my ideal within this situation is to position myself in a role where I maintain my independence, have an abundance of time, I have a passive income. So in my ideal little fantasy land, I have a partner. Let's say we have kids. I now have the time, energy, and resources to devote to them, similar to what you were describing for your kids, to be present and be a parent for them. I think it's definitely a throwback to my growing up, because we all aspire to be better parents than our parents were, and arguably our parents said exactly the same thing. So there's no escaping this sort of helix. It's sort of like Ouroboros in a way, the snake that keeps swallowing its own tail. We want to be better than the last one, and so on and so forth. But if there's one thing I'd like to give my kids that I feel I didn't have, is that just time and attention, that sort of unconditional love and support, especially growing up and through adolescence. Like I'd like to be the parent and father figure that they're available for them. Right now, not an ideal time to do that.
No,
next,
no, it's not for you. No,
not for me. And yeah, if I arguably I have to have sex with someone, arguably I have to be in a relationship. And baby, what do you want? And if we're going to have kids, in what country shall we raise them? And all those fun discussions. So yeah, solid maybe. I don't know.
Interesting. For me, that triggers a question. Is like, and what would I'm such a fucking sales and marketing guy. What would sway your answer? What would convert you? What
do you either way?
Sure, absolutely. And I feel like for me, just looking outside in and hearing what you're talking about, and not in a negative way, I feel like it's actually a really healthy observation. Is you're just realizing that it has to be with the right person. And I think a lot of us, including myself, have gotten into circumstances where we have children with the wrong person.
Right. And there was something, I'll come to my question later, but I'll try and answer yours first. I honestly don't know, buddy. Look, it's like if I don't think I could be pushed to a hard no, because it's like never say never, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I was going to swing it more to a yes, it would be, ideal partner who is, undoubtedly European, and we're madly in love, and she's as much of a misfit as I am, and we could live together for a few years and actually experience life before we had kids. You know what I mean? So then you could get a sense of traveling, whether you trust this person, and go through some hard times to figure out if is she going to support me as much as I can support her, all that sort of shit. And then if and when we decide where we want to live in the world or how we want to do it, then if we wanted to have children together, because ideally in my brain, I see her as a driven, ambitious sort of career woman, in whatever it is that she does, because I think intelligence and strength in women is sexy as fuck. And I want to be inspired by the girl that I'm choosing to live the rest of my life with. So challenge me, baby, I'm all for it. So if you're going to be pregnant and then give birth, what's going to happen afterwards? I guess and yeah, I don't know what's going to push me to a solid answer either way. I maintain my objective island. Sorry, I'm not.
No, that's fine. Ladies, do you know what sea you have to fucking cross?
But at least, yeah. Look, I'll backtrack to something that you were saying before, because sometimes, a lot of parents, yeah, it is a one night stand, or it is you're dating in your 20s for 6 months and she gets pregnant, and then you're like, oh fuck, suppose we better get married, and then you have
especially in this hookup culture that we're in now.
Right. So, but yeah, okay. I mean, there's a caveat to that, because it's been going on for all of time. Like, let's not pretend.
And I wonder if it's just the window that we have with social media that kind of exacerbates the view of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always happened, except social media means the curtain's pulled back. That's all.
Right. Yeah.
So back in it's funny because my grandmother occasionally has this discussion like, oh, kids today, and it's like, listen, like we all know that your mother, and her sisters are sort of the product of an affair that we probably shouldn't talk about, and then a shotgun wedding and all these sorts of things. So all this shit happened behind the scenes, right? And you're giggling because you've probably got the same family tree, and all of you misfits at home probably know, oh, actually, yeah, my great aunt, and we don't actually know who the grandfather is, and so this shit's going on for all the time. It's just older generations.
What do they call that? Like a mailman's baby or something?
Yeah, all of that. But older generations love to punch down on younger generations because you don't know, blah, 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 blah. And we love to blame social media for all of this shit when really you would have gone to the sock hop and hooked up with the Sailor Boys as well. So grow up. Anyway. But my question, I guess, is do you think it was easier for our parents to work and live and raise a family, either economically or in terms of support or whatever? Because my parents met early mid-20s. They had me almost immediately after getting married, and they're to their credit, they're the ones who are still together 40-something years later, and the only ones out of uncles and aunts and all this sort of shit. So I'm wondering, given the cost of living, we seem to be more busy, post-COVID disruptions and potential recession and all this sort of shit. Do you think it was easier back then to raise a family while having a career or two?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I also I'm aware enough to know that I don't have the full scope. But if I'm talking subjectively, yes, I do. I think financially things were a little bit different. I think more importantly than that, social values were different.
How so?
And maybe I'm having a little change of heart just because of what we were just talking about. But as I'm working through it out loud, I do feel like it has changed, because before even then, these things went on, and you had the milk carton babies or whatever we want to call them. The thing is, there was this like underlying standard that you stuck it out to make it work. And now I think there's a really unhealthy version of that. But then again, I do think there's a lot of families, and I feel like I've had a couple of examples of them in my life where, maybe when we were kids, right, justifiably so, it was like, damn, your parents do not like each other, right? But then, as we get a little bit older, and like you said, they're the ones that stuck it out, right? They didn't just cut and run. They might not have liked each other for extended amount of time or whatever that might be, because of the pressures of raising a fucking child and trying to have a career like we're talking about. That's really there's something in that. That doesn't seem to be as present today to me as I'm gonna stick it out, because there's so many options, and I feel like we were talking about with social media, that's where my opinion doesn't necessarily sway, because before, right, you could go down to the local fucking calf and you'd see a fucking single man that wanted to get with all the moms, and it is what it is. Now it's every time you open your phone, it's every time you go to a different app, it's all these different things, and we talk about the highlight reel and stuff like that, and I think mothers are under pressure right now to express themselves and show themselves as something that is objectively what we want as men: a good mother, loving, happy, these kind of things, like blah blah blah. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong, but I do feel like social media has had an impact in that sense, to where everything feels a little bit more like an option, and it's like the shiny toy syndrome, and it's like, we can drop this, and it feels like that in the sense that, watching my parents and their friends and generations grow up. Again, I had a couple divorces in that circle, and people didn't stay together, things gossip, things like that. But at the same time, there's a lot of examples that did, and I'm like, shit, where you guys are at now, I admire that, and I like that, and I would model after what you guys are doing. And that's healthy communication, that's honesty, that's determination, that's commitment. Yeah, maybe that's it for me. I think a lot of the people that I see and watch, there's never that full commitment. And I'll be honest with you, Chris, I'm one of those guys. I get picked on a lot because me and Tiff have never got married. I and it's so weird. I'm not going to sit here and explain that. It's a whole different topic and time and place, but it's just not where I sit. It's just not a view I have. But to some people, that's a lack of commitment. That's not what it is to me. It's I'm going to show up for you, whether I like you or not. Whether we have this perfect relationship or not. And if you can do the same for me, that's when I trust that forever is an objective that we can achieve. And I think that's the same for anybody. And it's bizarre because I, for a long time, thought it was just the right person, right? It's just the right person will make it work and it'll be fine and everything will feel balanced and great. It's like, bro, you've got a lot of shit to work on in here and in here before you can even jokingly entertain having something of health and value in your life on that level. You know what I mean? Because it takes a freaking commitment. It takes a commitment. So big rant. Sorry, didn't really answer that, but yeah, that's how I feel about it. And again, like I don't know. I'm not sure. Social media is weird. It's new, and I'm at the opinion too where all this stuff and these changes that we're going through are happening at such a fast influx and pace that I can't sit here and actually say I understand any of this, because it is moving quickly, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. I don't know. It makes me wonder for you because as I was explaining that, I think you and we're always kind of a little bit in opposition that social media has as much impact as one or the other says it does. So I'm curious.
Yeah, look, I always often take the view that it's the person, not the tool.
Mm-hmm,
and we look. Social media is an interesting tool, and it gets blamed for a lot. But really, if you ask the questions like, well, why did you download the app and what do you use it for? And you can apply that to Tinder, you can apply that to Instagram, you can apply that to TikTok, you can apply that to Snapchat. Like pick your medium. The question is still the same. Why did you download it? Why did you make the choice? And what do you use it for? Right? I don't have any of that on my phone. The only thing I have on is LinkedIn, and that's just to do the professional thing. You know what I mean? No Instas, no highlight reel, and conversely, not following up on anyone else's highlight reel. No Snapchats. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. I have WhatsApp. Thanks. So I have had them previously, but then I didn't like. I didn't like it. One, it's boring. Everyone's life isn't as interesting as you fucking think it is. Like maybe 1%, or let's say when it hits summer in Europe, and everyone off they go to club in Ibiza and hit the Spanish coast and this sort of shit, and you're like, oh, isn't that fucking cool? Like, okay, great. But even when I was in relationships, I didn't have. Insta was a social tool just to kind of keep tabs on my friends and see what's up. This is the thing. You can blame the tool. You can say like, oh, but now there's so many options. It's like, well, that's you, Jane, downloading the app to look at a whole bunch of options. So if you can't commit to something, then it doesn't matter how many apps you have, or even if you have no apps, you're always going to have the same issue, right? Or if you feel the need to compete with the Jones, if you feel the need to compete with the Joneses, and that's always been a human failing, but before social media came along. So long before, right? And husbands thinking that husbands thinking that they should work 80 hours a week to earn a lifestyle, to provide for a family, and that's their role. But then when he comes home, he deserves to have a meal cooked and the kids in bed, and they should be well behaved because that's the woman's job, and these sorts of things. So there's a if we were going to give social media any sort of credit, it would be to say that it's a portal by which you can expose yourself to like lots of different ideas and theories and dynamics globally. Once if you go looking outside of your echo chamber, then you can find some really, really interesting stuff around the world. Now, again, it's the person, not the tool. Like, you have to go looking for it. If you're surprised that you open TikTok and all you've got is 14-year-old girls dancing on your feed, then, when there's you can search anything you want in the world and get
by
some...
this time, I should have some documentation that'll help you train your news feed so you won't see more tits in there. But I get, yeah.
So when it comes when it comes to options and relationships,
yeah, I just argue the accessibility. That's it. You're right. You boiled it down to simpler terms, and like realistically for me, I don't have a solid argument outside of what you're saying, other than that there's more access to the options.
Right, and humans, if humans have proved anything in a variety of different fields, is like we're incredibly poor at self-regulation, right?
The worst. The worst.
And capitalism is also a great example. 2008 GFC, everyone got greedy and stupid, so we thought we'd get more greedy and more stupid, and then it all collapses, and we go, how did that happen? And then we rebuild exactly the same thing. We're very, very poor at self-regulation. We're very, very poor at self-discipline. There often doesn't seem to be an immediate payoff to any of this. So why, going back to something that you were saying, like, why should I commit to you, Broedy, in a relationship? Why should I try and trust you? Why should I try and give this a chance when there could be someone, something, somewhere out there that could be better? Right. And now this isn't a failing of the app. This is a failing of the individual.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny too, because, talking about technology and talking about apps, let's, flash forward to where we're at now. And it's funny, tying this back into kids and careers and things like that. What I'm seeing on social media is people are catching on to the illusions, right?
Yeah.
I see it every day. And one of the illusions that people are catching on to is we've been fed this system that I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I leave my family and my home for 10 hours a day for the better part of my awareness in the day, my consciousness, right? And then I come home, I eat, and I sleep, and I do it over again. That's fucked. And especially as a parent, because we talked about this a little bit earlier. There's a high demand. And I think if you want to do this right and you want to raise human beings that are at least rounded, right? I won't say complete, because I don't think anybody can pull that off, but at least rounded. It truly does take your attention. One of the things that I've noticed that's so unique about being a parent is, and it's a lot different than life, you got to show up with the credentials with life, right? I got to have done the thing. I got to have the example. I got to have the proof. With my kids, I just have to show up. I just, and to really show up, you need the mental space and the physical time to be there, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of people are catching on and they go, this system sucks. I want to be with my family. I want to be raising my kids. I don't want the system raising my kids. I don't want Tammy down the street, who I don't even know on a personal level. I just have to submit to her taking care of my kids for 8 hours. This
And I'd
paradigm
reason,
that we made, and it's
yeah, and I'd reason COVID like really ripped the band-aid off a lot of these issues that were simmering underneath.
blew the thing wide open.
Right. And so that really exposed a lot, which is part of why this podcast came into being, Misfits, is we sort of recognized that there's a lot of professionals and a lot of you guys who are like trying to work, trying to have a life, trying to have relationships, maybe trying to raise kids, do all these sorts of things, but the rules have completely changed. You know, it's massive rehirings, massive refirings, recessions, promises were made that weren't kept. And obviously the ideal of working for the company for 20 to 30 years, getting your pension and cashing out is archaic now. So what are we supposed to do? And we might not have a lot of answers, but let's like walk through this together and have a rational, reasonable conversation about what it takes, what you want, and how you can balance all of this. Because again, arguably, being a good parent, having kids that are happy and healthy impacts you and impacts your professional life as much as it does like your life holistically. So should we not talk about it, or should we talk about it? And Broedy and I reason that we should. And here's another controversial question, B, is like, do you think everyone's cut out to be a parent?
Damn.
Because, you know, some countries you need a license to have a dog, but
Right.
anyone can have a kid, right?
Yes. So I think, I mean, excluding the extremes, right? Let's just leave that off the table. I think, yes, anybody could be a parent. Realistically, for me, it's where you're at in your level of awareness. Like, truly, that if you haven't started the path of self-awareness and exploring your conscious and your behavior and why you do the things you do, this is not for you. This is not for you, because it's going to force you to do that. If you're any bit of a reasonable human being, it's going to force you to do that. You're going to look at your child, you're going to see the little you, you're going to feel it, you're going to fucking feel, and it's going to force you. Within that, I'd say that's timing, and that's shitty, because so many parents become parents before we're ready, right? And especially me and myself. But that's where the answer gets a little muddy, because it did change me into who I felt I needed to be a parent. And I might not have been the best version, right? But this is also something too that I like to say to the misfits is like, we're all under this delusion that you're gonna do the work, get there, and then it's gonna be done, and you're gonna feel gratified and fulfilled and all this shit.
You know, you unlock the achievement, game over, you win.
Yep, you win. Yeah. No, you're waking up every fucking day and it's the next day. And if you can maybe not even just find the moments of joy in that, if you can center yourself in that, I think that's when anybody could be a parent, right? And it takes a little bit of balance. It takes, like I said, a little bit of internalization. I think if it's funny that you had mentioned I'm too selfish. Maybe so, as you are right now, but because you're aware of that, you wouldn't be if you did have a child.
I've taught a lot of kids in my life, and I'd like to think I'd be a good dad. I think I would be.
I do too.
And I also think that, thank you. I also think that it's also come with age as well. I think if I had kids younger, it just would have been survival mode. And also, given the sort of career and pursuits that I've had, I would have had to, I would have had to get some sort of stable gig or something to try and make it work, or like to afford to have kids, like living in the city. And I don't know
Those parts suck.
right, yeah. And see, I don't know how well that would suit someone like me. And this is what I mean by selfish, is like I used to, when I was writing for television and film, or even like working on my own projects for theater and everything else like that, if I was working 5 days a week, I could feel myself get cranky and simmering. So I scaled everything back to work the bare minimum, which means I could afford to skate by on whatever it was that I'm doing. So I would have more time to write and create and do shit. Now, for someone like my old man, and for a lot of misfits out there, that's ridiculous. Because writing and everything else is a hobby. The fuck are you doing? But no, but okay, for them, that's their rationale. But I can't explain to them that I would feel sick, have headaches, be really fucking irritable because I'd written something yesterday and I can't sit down to get back into it today because I have to be fucking doing whatever this is that I'm doing today. So I don't want to do that. And I actually would structure my life around the art, right? If I had some sort of responsibility like a child, unlikely, really, really unlikely. Now, and the punchline is, I don't know whether I would have developed my craft and my skill set and written the book and done all this sort of thing to such a level to be where I am now. Would I have designed said app and project, which is, we'll get into another time, which is going to change a lot of things and position me in a completely different world than where I have been previously. But that's arguably going to be more financially viable and stable. So it's
weird. As you're working that out loud, I'm just like, yeah, no, you wouldn't. I mean, I've been in there. I've been in there, right? I've been in that arena, and I've been there for a long time. We have had a conversation about this recently. It's taken a long time for me to check out of survival mode, and even in a place where I'm solid, right? I've got my career figured out. I've got what I want to do. I've done it. All these things. It's still, again, and I'd argue that being a parent is survival mode.
From what I observe from the outside, sometimes, some.
And it's very hard to click in and out, right? And I think that's what I'm understanding.
But it also seems that the game to be played is like anytime you step outside the house, like, oh no, everything's under control, right? Everything, the kids are dressed, are on the way to school, I'm on my way to work, I'm picking laundry up on the way back home. It's fucking clockwork, baby. It's we're good. But like inside the house, it's fucking riots and bombshells and all sorts of shit. The minute you step outside, it's game faces, and the pressure to be the perfect parent,
Oh, yeah, I'm not that guy. Also, if I'm in public, I don't mind who hears me being the parent that I am. I think that's a problem in society in general, and I don't think that's a present time thing. I think that's an all-time thing where we let the current views and opinions sway the way that we would naturally represent ourselves to our children because of a social dynamic. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not teaching my kids that shit.
Good.
Because that's what they're going to see. They're not going to see the message that I'm trying to teach them. They're not going to see I was prim and proper. No, they're going to, this motherfucker faked it.
It's like the folks that it's like the folks that call dads, the babysitter. Like, oh, are you babysitting today? Like, no, I'm a parent, motherfucker. Like that, and I'm allowed to be involved in my kid's life, and and I will be. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. It's one thing that I would question the Misfits about, because I feel like I've been lucky enough that I've had a really, maybe not actually healthy balance, because working from home and being a dad, not being able to check out, right? That's a
Yeah,
tough one.
yeah, yeah.
That's a tough one. But I think there are a lot of misfits out there that are pulling it off. You know what I mean? And maybe not even working from home, but doing what they're doing, and they show up and they're present, things like that. What does it mean to you when you get an outside opinion or influence that says this should be X, Y, and Z, or you should be X, Y, and Z? Because to me, when people show up like that, it's like it's just like you said, motherfucker. I'm a parent. What? I,
But
I am
is
a
it
father and I am a
isn't
man.
isn't it worse if it came from like either your in-laws or your parents?
Oh, it'd be the
And
worst.
right, and then they're looking down on you like, why are you holding the child like that? Like, give them to me, or like, this is the way you've got to. Your kid's having a tantrum, so this is the way you've got to approach it. And you
Yeah,
know,
I've been really lucky that I've been really lucky that my parents and my in-laws have, and I think this is where I'm a little bit more evolved in the sense of awareness, because they've given me that. They've given me that. They are aware of the trials and tribulations of being a parent. So they don't chastise the parents around them
okay,
for
yeah, yeah,
trying to be
yeah,
parents, right?
yeah,
And that's my biggest thing that I'm trying to say here in this episode is like, you don't have it figured out. I'm sorry, you don't know how your child's going to turn out 10 to 15 years. You could have a fucking blueprint written out, and I promise you that child's still going to choose what they take, and you do have a large influence, but you have little control, right?
So here's a question as we sort of move towards the final quarter. Is it looking back on how you were raised? What do you think that your folks did well, and let's say areas for improvement? That's awfully diplomatic. Like, or what could they have done better, or what do you think that you needed that you didn't get?
Yeah, it's funny. We talked about this a little tiny bit in season 1. I think it was 1 or 2. Um, I think if I could go back and talk to my younger dad and say, "Hey, I'm your son. This is what I need." Um, it's bizarre because it's just like we talked about, and it sucks too, because there are moments that he gave me such great and undivided attention. Now, why I say that is because I craved those moments. And there was a large portion of my childhood that he traveled, and I didn't get those moments, and I would miss those moments. And you almost get homesick, you know what I mean? And I think that's a lot of, I think that's a place that a lot of fathers inevitably and accidentally leave their kids, right? Because it's like we talked about with those societal pressures and the things and shit, even your own stuff. I have stuff I want to accomplish, and you just miss them. You just miss them, and really truly now watching my sons, and it's bizarre, just being there, right? When they want to come around the corner and say, "Hey, Cole said this to me earlier and this really hurt me." But I'm there. I'm there. Because there's a universe that I'm not, and he has nobody to talk to. So attention. I mean, really, truly, because again, it takes some awareness, but we are all so damn selfish. We're all so damn self-absorbed, and your kids are going to take the brunt of that, and they don't deserve it, quite simply. And trust me when I say it'll make you a better person if you can try to facilitate what they do need, and just to the best of your ability. Don't act like you got it figured out, because it's okay not to. You know what I mean? It's okay not to have it figured out. But yeah, attention. And then you know what? It's bizarre, because I will, to the other part of the question, that is what they did well too. They did well too. That's where it's a bizarre, contradictory answer there. because, again, I just explained it a little bit. It's just the craving of, you see what you could get and have all the time, and then it's not there, whether they're sad or they've been traveling or this or that, and you get this positive, uplifting, wonderful thing, and then you come to get it again, and it's either not there or they can't present it for you, and that's heartbreaking. But to both of my parents, they did a fantastic job when they could show up and give you the attention, and that's what, to me, has driven me to try to find a way to give that attention all the time. Now your turn, sir. Your turn. Same question. That right back at you. right back at you.
I think it's a similar answer to yeah, like if anyone had a happy childhood, they wouldn't have ended up in that, right? So yeah, and I think attention's a big one, but more, I think more specifically, it's that some sort of unconditional love and acceptance. Like school and doing well in studies was always like a big carrot that was sort of dangled in front of us. So scoring well on the tests was the highest praise, you know. But what about all the things that I like and that I want to do? You know, so if I'm on stage or if I've written a thing, or, you know, we've talked a little bit about this before, and one of my greatest frustrations as an adult is whatever I've committed myself to independently and succeeded and exceeded at is of no value because I didn't get that university degree, or because I didn't get, or I choose not to work the full-time job with the company, because these are things that only my old man values because that was his life, and that my mother, God bless her, is too passive to stand up and claim that space of, no, like, you should do that thing. She just she acquiesces to that because she doesn't want to cause waves. So it feels like for anything that I cared about, I was left to do it on my own. It can be incredibly lonely and frustrating, and especially when you start to achieve certain things, and you write a book and they haven't read it and things like that. That hurts the child inside, because, you know, anytime, you know, they draw on a piece of paper and they bring it to you, like, that's, I'm showing you my world, like, recognize me. That's what every child is saying. Whether that's a book, yeah, exactly, and whether that's a book or whether it's a company, it's sort of the same motive. And you'd like to think that if anyone was going to be supportive and love your achievements, it would be your folks. That doesn't seem to be the case for me. So there's an absence there, and I don't know if I'll ever reconcile it. I keep thinking that I have, and then it slaps me in the face at some other time. You know what I mean? And then I hate the fact that I'm an adult and still have to get through this adolescent shit. But here we are. That's what being human's all about. But look, we never wanted for anything. That's the funny thing. Like, if I wanted to go to drama camp in high school, they let me go to drama camp. You know what I mean? If I wanted to do this, if I wanted to go there, if I wanted to do these things, they let me do the thing. You know, so long as my grades were behaving, I was allowed to do the thing. You know, I could earn the extracurricular. And it's, like you said, it's a bit of a backhanded compliment, because out of this, I developed stupidly stubborn sense of hyper independence to get this shit done, because if no one else was going to do it, then I was going to do it, and let's go, get on my fucking page. And so I've been able to accomplish a lot because of that. But blessing, curse, two sides of the same coin. I don't know. But I guess this gets back to what I was saying before when you asked me, like, would I have kids now or why not? Like, well, this is what I'd want to give my kids. Give this sort of unconditional time, unconditional attention, whatever it is that you want. Like, grades are great, cool. Like, are you happy? Have you got friends? Are we? What are you interested in? Tell me all about it. This sort of thing. I guess to have that free time and attention, and to offer that sort of unconditional love and encouragement of whatever it is that you want to do.
I'd argue that you again, just falling back to the survival mode, I'd argue that you'd find a way to make it work. It's interesting. Yeah, I think being a parent when you're in the right mindset just expands you so much further than what you had the scope that you could achieve on a personal level, right? Because you don't know. You just do not know.
That's the cliche. That's what I hear. It's like you're never ready to be a parent. And then when you are, it's that sort of sink or swim thing. But you find your own rhythm. You find your own way. You make it work. And okay. And ideally, you've got friends, family, and a partner around you to share in this with. So you're not entirely on your own. But yeah, it's not it's no small subject, Misfit.
No, and that's, as we're wrapping up here, and this is actually very fitting, Misfits. I do have to go pick up the boys from football practice as we're talking about this. Yeah, it's interesting. We talk about this a lot. We're here to walk through the subjects, not necessarily present you a resolution. And really definitively, when it comes to career and kids, it's, can you make it work? Can you, right? And the flip side of that is, if the situation presents itself, I'm a firm believer that if you're a good person, that you will make it work. You will. Yeah, that's the best I got. Kids in a freaking nutshell are just a lot. They're just a lot, and it is time, and it is demand, and it does take attention, and it takes awareness. But that age-old cliche, it is the most rewarding job.
So try it out for a little bit. If you don't like it, you can always come back.
Oh, or be like my biological father said, I'm not going to try it at all.
On that note, that kind of wraps up episode 13. You voted, Misfits, so you've got no one to blame but yourself. Episode 14, Bid, you know what's coming up?
This is the last in the arc, correct?
Well, no, 14 then 15. 15 will be the last.
Correct. Okay.
You get a pass if you don't know, because we kind of changed up the order. So it's going to go like this, Misfits. It's either going to be talking to my friend Mathilde about work-life balance, depending where she is in the world, because we need to record with enough time to
or it's
edit.
going to be dealing with loss.
Very good. Very good, very good.
You guys don't have to drink.
So it's yeah. It's going to be one of those two, depending on the schedule, because whatever we record, we need enough time to edit to get up on Patreon 2 weeks early, and then it follows through for you guys on YouTube and Spotify. So that's what's happening. So speaking of which, you can listen for free, and you can watch us build on YouTube and Spotify. You can catch all the socials on Insta, on Facebook, on TikTok. Yes, you can join the Facebook and LinkedIn groups if you want to vote on all the episodes and stay up to date. And obviously you can support us on Patreon, get everything 2 weeks early, get access to some sick merch, which is coming very soon. Broedy, any final thoughts?
I love you, Misfits.
That's awfully sweet. Awfully sweet. On that note, I've been Chris.
I've been Broedy.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one, whatever that happens to be.